Okay, happy March. It's a sunny day here in Wisconsin. uh, Today's webinar is about materiality and priority setting for sustainability. So we will dive right in. Most of you are members, but I still have to give you the WSBC mission is to advance sustainable principles and practices forward through the power of business. And as you know, we do this through education, through helping you measure and improve your sustainability, and by facilitating education for our members in the community. So if you're not currently a member, we always invite you to join. We're getting ready to play our annual Cool Choices game, so that's very exciting. Great time to join so you can participate in that. We are launching our Green Masters program, the updated version next month, and then we have awards. So I like to share upcoming events so that you know what's coming down the pipe. Next week, I believe, is the Energy Efficiency Opportunities event that's at Northeast Technical College in collaboration with the Northeast Wisconsin Sustainable Leadership Group. So if you're interested in joining that, all of these events can be found on our website at wisconsinsustainability.com/upcoming events. I mentioned Cool Choices. We're starting that game in April, so make sure you register. We also have a webinar coming up April 6th on leveraging motor technology to save energy. This is one of our member companies, C-Motive. They have designed and prototype and are implementing a new motor technology using static electricity, which saves a ton in greenhouse gas emissions. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that and prototyping some of their technology, they're inviting other members to test their technology. So that's on April 6th. We have a networking meet and greet coming up in April, so that's always a great way to get to know your other members. And then we'll be launching the Green Masters program at the end of April with sort of an info session and a launch event on the new tool. May is our next official webinar, which will be Sustainability Management Program Basic. So these webinars this year are sort of building on each other to help you really get the most out of your sustainability program. All right, so without further ado, I'll introduce our speakers for today. We have Michelle Miller with us. She is the Sustainability Manager for Taste and Beverage North America at Symrise. Christa is our Program Manager for the Green Masters program, so many of you probably know her. She's also a sustainability consultant. And we also have Amanda Hansen with us today, who's a process engineer, works on sustainability at Hydrite. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Michelle.
All right, well, welcome everybody. So I'm going to start off the conversation talking about materiality and what that means and kind of some tips and tricks that I have for how you can go about doing your materiality assessment for your company in-house instead of going outside to hire somebody to do it. So what is a materiality assessment to start? So a materiality assessment is an exercise that is aimed at engaging with your stakeholders to find out how important specific ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues are to them. So the insights that you gain from this exercise, however you go about doing it, can be used to help guide your strategy, priority initiatives, as well as helping you build a platform for how you're going to plan on communicating with your stakeholders about these different things that you're doing and help tell a more meaningful story that matters to them. Next slide. So kind of just these are my thoughts on what would be a good way to go about performing a materiality assessment. So I kind of put together a 4-step program. I'll go into depth on all 4 of these, but to start out, identifying categories, identifying key stakeholders, gathering their input, and then organizing and communicating on your results. So we'll go through, as I said, each one of these in depth. So when it comes time to identify key categories, you'll want to know what types of things you're even going to ask your stakeholders about or what things you're going to start researching for your company. So I put up some key questions here that you can ask to help even decide, is a topic material or important for our company to even ask our stakeholders about? So you could ask these questions of your leadership board, or even just asking yourself if how you would answer it. So have customers asked about the specific question? Is this topic related to a core input for our product? Could this topic represent a differentiator for us? Do our stakeholders view this as a risk? So some of these questions will just help narrow down the topic list, because as you know, sustainability encompasses a lot of different topics. So this will help you narrow down your list of what things you want to ask your stakeholders about. Next slide. So identifying key stakeholders, this should be one of the easiest steps that you perform. You should very likely your company should know what your key stakeholders are when looking at your value chain. But I threw up some examples here, a nice image that just shows that your competitors, your employees, your local community, your suppliers, regulators, your customers, those are all just very obvious ones, as well as media, industry groups, NGOs. Like I said, very likely if you have any type of management system or any type of programs, kind of your leadership team will definitely know who your stakeholders are. So once you've identified what your topics are, and you've identified who you want to ask the topics about or learn more about from those stakeholders, it's time to start kind of gathering input from all those stakeholders. Now, you don't always have to ask them. You can gather research from other ways. So you could use benchmarking tools such as the WSBC Green Masters, EcoVadis, SEDEX. Those are ways that you can gather input on what topics are material to you based on, when you take those surveys, what they say is a high priority in the sustainability world. You can also look at certifications that your company might have certifications for, what kind of topics they believe are important. And I just listed a couple there. Reporting frameworks like SASB, GRI, the Sustainable Development Goals, those can also help you look at what type of input and topics are important to your company, as well as any industry groups that you might be a part of. So look at what the group goals, missions, values, and any trends that those industry groups that you're a part of, or maybe would be a part of, and what they say. So like the AFMPA Association for Paper, they have a set of group goals out there. And so obviously if you're a part of that or would be a part of that group, it's safe to say that those topics that they identify as part of their goals should be likely material topics for your company as well. So investigate those industry group memberships and what kind of goals they have. The next thing you can do is investigate your key stakeholders just by going out there and looking at their websites and their public information. So what are their materiality assessments that they have available? What are their goals that they put out there? Do they have ESG reports? It's very likely that if you have a customer that has a materiality assessment out there, that you'll want to use that as input for something being a high priority for your company. Because if it's important for your customers, they're going to be one of your biggest stakeholders that should be help driving what your priorities are as a company. Then you can survey groups. You can survey your stakeholders. You can do an internal survey of like your own employees and your leadership team. You can also send it external to some of your stakeholders, like your suppliers or your customers, or your local community. You can do a homegrown kind of, one that can be built in SharePoint, for example. I've seen it done, or you can utilize existing survey programs like SurveyMonkey. I've done them both ways, and they're both very good. If you do build a survey, don't feel like you need to tackle everybody all at once. So if you want to just start internal with your survey, and then maybe in following years try to go external, just don't feel like if you create a survey that you need to ask everybody. When you do create your survey, though, just make sure that you ask both open-ended and targeted questions that are more multiple choice to make sure that you get really good feedback from the stakeholders. For surveying, don't feel like you have to create one in a system either. You can change your tactics depending on the audience. So you could have questions, but you could go with more direct meetings with some of your stakeholders. This works really well if you already have quarterly business reviews with your customers. You can always hijack one of the meetings and talk about sustainability as part of it and ask them some questions that you would in a survey that you would send out. And a lot of times you'll get more candid feedback and better feedback than just sending out a survey to some of the leaders. And if you make it part of the meeting, it's already on the schedule. You don't have to wait for them to fill it out. So you can take a multifaceted approach for how you gather this. You don't need to pick one of these. You can get different information from all over the place and bring it all together, which is what we'll talk about on the next page. Is once you gather the input. Oh, sorry, nope, I forgot I included this in here. This is an example of a survey question. Sorry, you can go to the next one, Jesse. I forgot I put this in here. So this is just an example of one question that we created in our SharePoint survey at a previous company I was with. So this is kind of just an example for folks that they can see and borrow. It kind of helps you rank out those topics. So those are those top topics that we picked out. And then we asked folks to rank them using a 1 to 5 scale. So this is what I was saying is now when it comes time to organize your results. So this looks like a lot of data, which it is. And again, don't feel like you have to go all out and start here, but this is just kind of a process that worked well with the company I was with. So you'll see all the way on the left is all the groupings of topics, and then column B is the actual topics that we had narrowed down. D is the GRI disclosure column, so it actually calls out what the GRI disclosures are for that, as well as the SASB and SASB disclosures that were flagged for our industry for this company. The SDGs are called out and how they're related to each topic. And then you'll see the different color coding is our input from those different stakeholders. So we had here the surveys. You can see column I is Green Masters and whether or not it was ranked as high. EcoVadis was on there, which is another benchmarking tool that this company happened to be participating in. Then we have industry groups. So the names of the industry groups are blacked out, but there's 4 different groups that this company was a part of, and we ranked them high if the research that we found on those industry groups indicated that there was high materiality for that type of group. Same thing for customers and suppliers. We basically did research and we looked at our customers and did one-on-one meetings with them. And if they basically told us and their goals coincided that it was a high material topic, then we indicated it as high. So each one of these high notes on there basically equated out to a number. So if it was blank, then it was 0. And if it was high, then it was a 5. If it was, we put in there medium, it was, maybe a 3 and a low was a 1 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but that's just kind of how we were able to then translate what does high priority mean, putting it into a number so that we could help graph it. So next slide, we then had some algorithms that pulled these high numbers, these highs that equal 5. So for our customers, suppliers, industry groups, and surveys, it pulled that if over 80% of the response for customers was a 5, then it was ranked as, if it was over 80% of the suppliers, then it ranked it as a 5. If it was only 50% of them, then it was a 4. So that's where the kind of number plays into it. For the importance to stakeholders, then what it did is it took all of these and it gave it a weight depending on what kind of stakeholder was responding. So for example, employee safety, we had a higher weight on that ranking for our employees. So our employees actually filled out an internal survey. And if the employee rank was, say a 5, we wanted to have more weight against that because the person that cares the most about its safety is obviously going to be the employee that is experiencing, the occupational health and safety as a material topic. Versus when it comes time to products, we obviously want to rank and weight what our customers have to say a little bit higher because they're again the ones that are receiving the products. So that's what that second window is showing, is that kind of the weights for each is a little bit is a little bit different depending on each topic. And I will say that this is not like a private document. If anybody would like a copy of kind of this that's been scrubbed a little bit of data and kind of manipulated to not release any information, that I'm more than happy to share it. So, because I know some of the algorithms are a little complicated to see unless you get in there and start playing with them yourself. So once you have kind of organized your data somehow like this, again, that was a very organized manner, but there's lots of different ways that you can do it. It could just be a gut check type of feel too against all the material topics after you have some internal discussions. It's time to organize the results in some type of graph. So usually the way that you have it is you have your influence of your stakeholders along one axis, and then you have the significance of the impact could have on your business on the other axis. And then basically they'll cross, and what you go to the upper right is most material versus what falls in the lower left is more non-material topics. So you'll want to make sure that when you're gathering your stakeholder input that it's on the x-axis, and your y-axis is your influence of your stakeholders or their feedback and impact to your business. This is usually an internal discussion that you'll have with your leadership on what they feel of these topics has the most to, be a huge impact to the business in terms of, could we get in trouble legally in this area? If we don't address this topic, would we lose customers? Would we lose employees? Things like that. So that's usually the type of discussion where the x-axis comes into play of what the business impact is for those topics. So I've seen the materiality displayed in lots of different ways. That first one is the most common that I showed, which you can see here from a couple different examples that I've seen out there, but I've seen them presented a bunch of different ways out there. So I just wanted to share this to show what some other ways are that you could see it. So that might seem like a lot of work, and maybe some company is not quite ready to take that step. Well, I just wanted to point out that SASB does have materiality mapping available for many different sectors that are out there already existing. So it'll show you your sector level map and what's a high priority versus a medium priority topic. Should be for your company, and it does break it down pretty well where most industries are covered, and then they'll have a standard disclosure template also for how to disclose on those material topics. So just wanted to point that out there that that is available if you're, again, not quite ready to go all out. So then I'll pass it off to Christa to say that there is another program that is very helpful, and that's Green Masters, especially the new 2.0. So
thanks for the plug, Michelle, and for reviewing that. So I'm Christa Kananen. I'm the manager of the new Green Masters program, and I'll be showing you how the new program incorporates materiality and priority setting into the platform. Next slide, please. So the Green Masters program allows companies to scope their sustainability program and their response to the assessment based on their business priorities to make it relevant to what they can realistically achieve. And it provides a roadmap for integrating those priority topics into how the organization does business. So it starts with identifying the material topics, then using that information to determine business priorities. You can see kind of follow along the circle. Once the priorities are established, the program provides a framework for integrating the topics into how you do business through providing metrics to track, best practices to implement, and KPIs to keep you on track. From there, you can implement improvement projects to make progress, and you can kind of monitor your progress through updates to your status within the platform. And then you can evaluate and adjust based on changing priorities for your organization, for your stakeholders, what's working, what's not, do the benefits that come align with your expectations. And so you continue that loop of assessing kind of a plan, do, check, act model. Next slide, please. So why start with materiality in the new platform? So at WSBC, we recognize that while all sustainability topics have a place in the conversation, not all topics are equally impactful for all organizations. And the reality is that resources in time, attention, and money are limited. So we encourage organizations to identify the most significant issues for their organization right now. And then as priorities change over time, the system allows users to update their identified priorities as their program grows and changes over time. So since announcing the transition to the new platform with this different approach, we've had a lot of questions about where to start, how many topics should be addressed, et cetera. So while there isn't a hard and fast rule, what we typically expect to see is reflected here. For an industrial operation, manufacturing, food production, things like that, we see that we expect that a company starting out might start with 3 to 5 topics. Then as your program grows, you might look at 5 to 7 topics. Then as you're getting more mature, you might start looking at 7 to 10 topics. And then once you get into that like mastering sustainability space, you might be looking at 10 to all 15 topics. So again, there's 15 topics in the new platform. And we, again, not one size fits all, but we kind of expect somewhere in that range to align with an organization's capacity for priority management. And then for a commercial organization, that might look a little bit different. You might not have as big of an environmental impact. So we see that would be starting out maybe with, again, 3 to 5 topics. And then as you advance and mature, 5 to 7 topics. And then once you hit that kind of mastering level status, you'd be looking at 7 to 10 topics. So essentially what we recommend is start with where you're at now and grow from there over time. And we really want to emphasize that the goal is quality, not quantity. So with the new program, we want to point out and emphasize that understanding what is material to your organization and letting that inform your prioritization of topics can help you really deeply integrate sustainability into how you do business, both now and in the future. And that's really where we see the value being added from sustainability practices. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the materiality section of the new platform. So participants can select the impact to their business and the importance to their stakeholders for each of the 15 included topics. And that covers environmental impacts, social impacts, workforce, and governance considerations. It's important to note that the platform offers a method of recording your response. It doesn't actually walk a company through how to make those decisions. So that's where Michelle's presentation with those resources for that process really come into play. And I would also be remiss if I didn't note that WSBC's affiliate organization, WMEP, offers a sustainability program assessment that helps companies navigate that process and prepare to participate in the new platform. And as a sustainability consultant, I would be one of the people helping you through that work. So certainly reach out to us if you're interested in that. Next slide, please. So once an organization has recorded their assessment of material topics, the platform will provide a matrix of those topics. So this is similar to what you saw in Michelle's portion of the presentation, where highest priority topics are in the upper right quadrant, and generally lower and to the left topics are lower priority for your organization. So using that information, participants then move on to the next section of the tool to select their business priorities. Again, the idea would be that your business priorities are informed by this information that you identify in the materiality worksheet and see as part of the materiality matrix. Next slide. So this is where participants will actually choose which topics will be included in their assessment. Again, we recommend starting with the 3 to 5 topics that rank highest in your materiality assessment. specifically if you're just starting out in sustainability. And then we expect that those priorities would grow over time. You would add additional priorities to your assessment as your program matures and sustainability is integrated into how you do business. Next slide, please. So finally, just a few quick tips on how to use the process to build value through sustainability. One is think in terms of long-term timeframes. So for example, climate change for a lot of organizations in Wisconsin might not impact you on a monthly or quarterly scale, but over years, over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 30, we're really going to start to see significant impacts of climate change, even here in Wisconsin. And if we're not taking action now, you'll get caught by some of those implications. So again, when you're thinking about sustainability and priority setting, what's material, it's important to look beyond just the immediate term. Second, consider submerged value. So we like to say, think about an iceberg, right? Where a lot of the iceberg actually lies under the surface. So when you're thinking about what's material, how might you identify those topics and implications that are maybe less obvious, like the long-term versus immediate impacts? And that's both in terms of risk, but also reward and upside, right? A lot of the value and benefit of sustainability for businesses is in value creation and value creation for a broad range of stakeholders. And then getting to that, involve sufficient stakeholder perspectives. Michelle talked about a few different ways that you can get perspectives from multiple stakeholder groups. Sometimes it's direct engagement. Sometimes there are existing engagement channels you can use. Sometimes you need to create new channels that don't exist. Consider how many stakeholders you need to engage with to get a representative sample. How many groups, how many stakeholders within that group, who's the most important, which perspectives are maybe the most impactful for your organization. Those are important questions. And again, consider that submerged value even in your stakeholder evaluation process. It might not be an obvious impact to your organization, but really be sure you're thinking critically through that process. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda, who's going to share a little bit about Hydrite's journey, maybe a little bit less traditional in the materiality portion, but really impactful in their priority setting process. So Amanda, take it away.
Great, thank you for that introduction, Christa. So I just wanted to start off with really providing a brief overview of Hydrite, so I can provide some perspective about why we did things the way that we did things. So Hydrite is a privately owned company and have been since our inception over 94 years ago. Our corporate office is in Brookfield. We have a few manufacturing locations throughout Wisconsin. We also have manufacturing locations throughout the US, Texas, California, and have various salespeople located across the nation as well. So all in all, we have a little bit over 1,000 employees. We are a manufacturer and distributor of specialty and industrial chemicals. So not only are we facilitating manufacturing operations on site, we also own a portion of our fleet that we use to deliver products and services to our customers. We are able to manufacture over 3,000 different types of products, and we sell to every single industry: food, agriculture, industrial, mining, you name it. We probably sell something to them. So just wanted to provide a little bit of background on who we are. And then I can now dive into a little bit of how we tackled materiality, which, as Christa mentioned, is not as cookie cutter as some of the assessments done. Next slide, please. So there are a few different influences that we used to determine our materiality here at Hydrite. So one of the first ones that we used was the expertise of our team. So taking a look at the people that we had involved in our sustainability program, this would be about last summer is when we were engaging in a lot of conversations around our materiality, is what do each of us bring to the table and how can we utilize those skill sets without having to reach out for more resources, as resources in sustainability was something that we did not have a lot of at that time. So our sustainability team consisted of 2 engineers, 1 executive, and then 1 director of our volunteer program who also had a background in procurement. So I'm a process engineer, and then we also had an engineering manager on the team that had quite a few years of experience at Hydrite. So we were able to understand sort of the environmental side of sustainability and understood how to gather and calculate some of the data needed for that climate impact and understanding water consumption. The director of our volunteer team obviously had direction and direct say over the direction of Hydrite Helps, that program. So they were able to investigate social items more heavily than us as engineers would. And we also had an executive member on our team, which we found out was crucial in being able to engage the rest of our executive team at Hydrite, and just being able to frame our communications and have insight into what their priorities were and what they were expecting out of a sustainability program. As a company who drives for 100% customer satisfaction, customers are a huge component of what we do. So we wanted to make sure that we also included our commercial team to some point. At that time, we didn't necessarily know what that meant. We understood that we were receiving requests from customers regarding sustainability, but we were unsure of what those conversations looked like when we weren't involved, or what they looked like at a facility level when we would visit customer sites. So taking the knowledge and understanding that our team already had really was the first step in just understanding that, yes, we know that we can tackle the environmental side and we know where we can touch on the social aspects. Next, we really took a look at our company values. So something that's really important to Hydrite as a chemical manufacturer and distributor is safety. Safety is seen everywhere from our corporate facility down to our manufacturing sites. It's talked about in almost every single meeting. So we understand that safety needs to be somewhere in our sustainability program, and already having a lot of success and traction and communications throughout our plants and company and just that engagement, we saw the need to not only include that, but try to also mimic the way that safety was portrayed at Hydrite. So that was something that we knew we wanted to include. And then again, that creative products and solutions, we're a company that really wants to support our customers. So being able to include what our customers' needs and wants are was important for us to have a successful program and continue to drive that buy-in for the rest of our company to want to put resources into sustainability. So that sort of leads into the next thing that really influenced our sustainability, which was the customer surveys and questionnaires that we were receiving. So we've been receiving requests regarding sustainability from our customers for many, many years. And recently we've taken some time to really digest what our customers are actually asking of us. Are they asking for data on how much water we use? Are they asking for our safety policies? Are they asking for a supplier code of conduct? So really just taking a look at all of the questionnaires that we're receiving, whether those are just going to be forms that these customers are generating on their own, or the EcoVadis or CDP platform, which we're also being asked to fill out, and really trying to pick apart the themes that were being asked and those data points that were being asked. Something that we did further was taking a look at who's asking what of us. Are there specific industries that are asking items of us, and how does that change what we might want to prioritize? For example, we serve a lot of customers in the food and dairy industry. So the USDA put out some goals that they have around carbon neutrality and net zero and so forth. So we saw that these customers were having to engage in that goal, which was why we were now engaging in that goal with our customers as well. So just taking a look at, you know, what was going on out there and what were we going to expect to see from our customers. And then lastly, reporting standards. So there are tons of standards out there, and ones that we tended to look at in the beginning and even now was GRI and SASB. So what we did is we really just kind of took a look at these reporting standards to not only begin to organize the information that we already had, but to figure out, you know, where the gaps lie and what information was important to these reporting platforms, which are also being cited by our customers to use. So being able to use these reporting standards to try to determine our materiality was helpful not only now for organization, but it also helps us later when we want to officially report to any of these reporting standards and put out those sustainability reports and annual reports. Looking at these ahead of time would really help us prepare and be proactive for what's to come later. So these conversations took place last summer, I would say, but have been ongoing a little bit for a couple of years now. So after all these conversations, discussions with our executives, discussions with our commercial team, and also discussions with our customer, we landed on this. So these are going to be our 4 focus areas that Hydrite is trying to impact with our sustainability program. So our people, our environment, our customers, and our community. Underneath each of these 4 areas are different efforts and focuses that we have now. So it was really important for us to understand and communicate that, yes, these are the items that we want to focus on now, but these are not the items that we have to focus on for the rest of time. These can change however much as we want, but understanding that this is what we are focusing on now, and this is what we want to create communication and impacts and engagement around. So based on the materiality conversations that we had and kind of where we're at today, there are a few items that have come out of those conversations and discussions regarding materiality and sort of where we're at now and where we want to be. So Hydrite recently achieved our best safety performance in our history ever, which is fantastic. So we understand that safety is going to be a crucial part of the materiality at Hydrite for a while. But we also knew that the Our People section, we wanted to include more items, but we just weren't ready at that time. So we've been having conversations and collaborations with our human resources team to begin to discuss, you know, where are we at with our social metrics at Hydrite? How can we work together to engage folks on improving some of these metrics? So the conversations that we had earlier has now led to collaborations that happen on a monthly basis almost now. For the environment piece, we recently completed the installation of our first on-site renewable energy system, which was a huge investment for capital at Hydrite into a renewable energy system. So this has led to having regular meetings with our operations and engineering teams to make sure that sustainability still remains a piece in our capital investing. We're also working on reduction type goals for the environmental metric areas that we determine to be material at this time. For our customers, we have had many interactions with our commercial team to equip them with the materials that they need to discuss some of these topics with our customers. So we want them to be able to talk about the things that are material to Hydrite well. So we've had many meetings and also distribution of materials to help engage in those discussions, as well as us being brought into more discussions. We also have worked with our commercial team to determine, you know, what our impact on our customers are with our products and services. So we're continuing to kind of transform that process and get feedback from our customers to change our program. And then lastly, we did set an engagement goal for our Hydrite Helps program to be achieved by the end of 2025. So while Hydrite's materiality looks like this now, and we are working on many things, we understand that this is a changing thing, and we are having consistent conversations with leadership to make sure that we're working on the things that are important to us and important to the business. And we hope that at some point, sustainability at Hydrite encompasses all things under ESG, but right now we're working on what we're working on and just revisiting that when we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. I think your story is great to illustrate there's a lot of different ways to do this, but really engaging those who are interested in being engaged with including leadership is a huge part of this process, right? So I just had a couple tips that I wanted to sort of reiterate to sort of wrap up the conversation. And then we have a couple great questions and we can answer any other questions y'all might have. So the first one is just making sure you're considering overall business objectives and corporate-wide strategy, right? What we hear over and over is sustainability becomes this extra thing, and it really should not and does not have to. It needs to be integrated across the organization. And the best way to do that is to align with the business goals and business strategy of the organization. I think Amanda did a great job of sort of bringing in leadership to help support that and to make sure that they were in alignment with the overall vision of the organization and the strategic plan for the organization. We also need to align goals across functions and across value chains. So you often hear sustainability folks say we're kind of change management leaders, because really we need to be able to engage across different stakeholder groups, across business units, understand a variety of priorities, competing priorities very often. Like Amanda again shared about, bringing in engineers who think very differently than the HR folks, right? And so that just adds value to your team, really, and adding value to the overall organization through the program that you're developing, right? It needs to be something that works for the whole business. Another thing is really just understanding where you are today and where you might need to go in the future, right? Like, sustainability is a huge elephant. You can't eat it all at once. You just can take a bite at a time. So again, Amanda's story illustrates really well, like, this is our snapshot in time, and we've already made great progress on getting towards our future state. And each time your future state might change, if a 5-year cycle or a 10-year cycle or a 2-year cycle, whatever it is, just, take that snapshot in time where you are, and then project out on where you want to be. Another big thing is sort of learning how to put a numerical value to the projects that you're doing. Working with Amanda and her team, I know that they had a huge conversation with finance. How do we incorporate this into the CapEx, capital expenditure process, right? Like, you need to be able to share what ROIs are for in projects, whether it's energy reduction or greenhouse gas reduction or water efficiency. So if that's a gap in sort of your team's knowledge, either engage your finance team to be an ally and support you, or maybe that's just an area you can get some outside support. Along with that, continue to document your process and your successes, as well as trying to monetize those successes, right? Like, business leaders want to understand how this is going to add value to their organization. And a lot of them see it through dollars and cents. And we see over and over, the more you align with sustainability, the more cost savings you're able to have across the company. So being able to share those successes is an important part of this process. And I think that that sort of links to one of the things that Jeff and I were chatting about in the chat, which is like really understanding what the impacts of these areas are. It's one thing to sit down and hear what your stakeholders have to say, but you also really need to validate that against what impacts you can have as an organization, right? And that's a really important part of materiality setting. An example that's coming to mind is an aluminum manufacturer, right? They use an incredible amount of energy to process aluminum. Of course, energy is going to be a material topic to them. That's going to be one area that they can have a tremendous amount of impact in design and process and product, right? And so just making sure that those topics that you're setting as priorities and setting as business priorities through the materiality process are ways that you can drive value and impact through your organization. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. I think being transparent in the process, you don't like start where you're at. I say engage stakeholders, but also like that can be an overwhelming process. So start where you're at, start with having the conversations amongst your team, bring in leadership, and then you can grow that stakeholder group input over time as it's necessary and important to the organization. And then set achievable goals and wins. The other things I wrote down that came up through the sharing today was having a cross-functional team. I sort of did mention that, right? So having people with different perspectives on the team is really important. So to make sure, again, you're aligning business strategy, it helps bring diverse perspectives to the conversation to really help you drive to the best outcome. Having leadership participation, I know can be a gap and a challenge area for a lot of organizations, but it's really necessary, again, to be able to drive impact across the organization. So we do have tips and tricks on how to help that. I think the Learning CFO Speak helps a lot with that. But if you need support on that, you can always reach out. And then validating the impacts that are impactful. Again, that was, I think, part of Jeff's point. So I'm going to pause here. Let's see. Yeah, so that was all in terms of the slides that we have. I am going to stop sharing. And I think I'll start with asking this conversation or asking this question that Jeff asked earlier. How would a stakeholder know the significance of an impact to the point that it should be a candidate to drive strategy? So that was kind of the start of our chat conversation, but I wanted to ask that question to each of you if you have different thoughts on, just thoughts or feedback on that.
Yeah, I can go first. So I would say that that's where it's important to recognize that materiality has the two axes. It has the importance to stakeholders versus that significance of impact to the business. So the influence of your stakeholders and their feedback was kind of more of the process that I was talking through and gathering theirs. So, you know, they might have something that comes out that says it's of high importance to them as a stakeholder, but then when you come together as the business leaders or, you know, as Hydrite did it, kind of coming together as a team to talk about what the impact and high impacts of the business could be, they might not align. So it might not become a strategic topic for your company. So that's why it's important to do both and recognize what hits both, what is important to your stakeholders, but then also has a high impact to your business. So it's important to kind of see the two differentiators of the two types of things there and how you get highs in both of those areas. And then when they intersect, that's the material topic for the company.
Christa or Amanda, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I can. This is a little bit unrelated to what I shared, but I would just say that it can be really hard to stay focused on what's actually impactful, like either what your organization can impact or what your organization is really impacted by, especially when you start getting bombarded with all of this feedback, right, from your industry, from, you know, the trends and ESG disclosure and you know, these big companies are addressing 25 different things, and, you know, it can be really hard to stay focused on, no, for us, for our reality, what matters, what can we impact, what impacts us. And so I guess more than anything, I would just say, don't be afraid to say no to certain things when you need to say no, right? Like, again, start with where you're at. Don't be afraid to say, yep, that's an important issue in society, but it literally has nothing to do with us, so we're not going to focus on it right now. Or you might say, you know what, we would prefer that that had nothing to do with us because we don't like that topic. But our reality is that actually our customers care about it a lot. And if we don't start taking action, even if it's hard to take action, then we're going to fall behind. And so be ruthless about kind of staying true to that question about what can impact us, what can we impact, and try to shut out the noise. And a big part of how you can do that is knowing why, right? Knowing why you've chosen to pursue a topic or not pursue a topic can really help in that process.
I love that, being ruthless. It's great advice, honestly, and because it's very hard to do.
I have a story of something that we actually did at Hydrite that opened our eyes to this issue. A couple of years ago, we did conduct an internal survey questionnaire where we surveyed our employees using the UN SDGs as sort of the content and asking them to rank that. So as I mentioned, Hydrite is a chemical manufacturer and distributor, and one of the main things that our employees are concerned about is ending hunger. So that was a little bit hard for us to figure out, okay, what do we do with this as a chemical manufacturer? So we kind of use that survey as a learning lesson almost of, okay, these are what's important to our employees. But knowing what we know, for example, about our energy usage and energy intensity as a manufacturer of chemicals, you know, we know that we need to focus on this item versus that item. So it was helpful, but we kind of saw, you know, how we might have missed asking, okay, like, but what actually really impacts the business? So that was about a learning process we certainly went through there and kind of brought it back to our internal team discussions.
Yeah, that's a great example, and also goes to, you learn as you go, right? You might not get the questions in the surveys right, perfectly right the first time, and you can adjust, right? The next time you do a survey, you might ask different questions based on your learnings there. Great. So Jeff, I did just want to, if you're still out there, just invite you to add any follow-up thoughts that you had on this, or what you see or have learned from your experience.
Oh, thanks, Jesse.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say anything unless invited, but I'll be very, very brief. I think it was Christa who was just talking, that I think was one of the things she said made a lot of sense. It's where to focus, because you see a lot of noise topics in materiality assessments, and that kind of confusion and even overlap between topics can be really tough for an organization to take on. For example, energy, climate, even life cycle topics. You could say that all three of those overlap each other. And then which one is material? If one is, but the others aren't, that can be very confusing. So understanding what impacts look like, and then choosing which of those the business has influence over and which are important to customers and other stakeholders, can be extremely clarifying. So that's one of the things we found, is separate aspects like recyclability and recycled content or circularity from impacts like greenhouse gas, water scarcity, human toxicity. Then you have some sources of truth to look at that kind of create consolidation in those categories. So that's what we've really found has helped organizations clean up the noise and and be able to focus, kind of tunnel in on what really matters.
Mhm. Yeah, great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like I had written in the chat, right? Like, yeah, industry matters in these cases, right? Like food and beverage, insurance, like those are sectors that climate is playing a huge impact or huge, having huge impacts. That can't be ignored, right? But yet at the same time, sometimes with manufacturing, right, you just, especially in Wisconsin, we don't see climate related risk as in our face, right? And so that might look different if you have operations in somewhere in the South, right? Where if you're a water heavy user, right? So yeah, just taking those nuances into account are really important, and you'll get more sophisticated over time, right? As you
I
learn
think,
and as you go. Mhm.
yeah, just to summarize that, it's knowing which things are more strategies, and then which things are actual impacts and material, and to separate those two.
Mm,
Because looking at some of the lists on the screen, they were kind of a mixture of ways to go about change
mhm.
and items that are actually material in terms of impact. And it can be difficult to separate those two out, especially when there's a lot of organizational learning that needs to take place in the difference between an impact and a strategy too. So
Mhm.
it's makes materiality assessments a great opportunity to have some of that learning occur as well.
Yeah. Yeah, great point about the learning of what an impact actually means and is for the company, right? I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add on that or any additional questions.
I'll just offer that in developing the content for the new Green Masters program, Jeff, we had some of the same challenges in overlap, right? What goes in which bucket? And so the same challenges that some of you may experience in determining what's material and how to, create those lines of demarcation. We welcome your feedback about the new Green Masters platform, but we understand we had some of those challenges as well. And the reality is that, nothing in sustainability happens in a vacuum, right? Whether it's the actions you're taking and the impact on your stakeholders or what your stakeholders care about impacts what you focus on to, operations, sales, marketing, right? It's all integrated. And your material use has a huge carbon footprint, right? So it can be hard to make some of those distinctions. And I think to Jesse's point, work with your best available knowledge, be transparent about the process, and don't be afraid to pivot when you need to pivot. And we're doing the same on our end.
Exactly. Did I share the right screen?
Yes.
Okay. So there was a question about the dimensions in Green Master. So I thought we had a minute here. I thought I would just go ahead and share the final list that's being developed. So there are 4 buckets: environment, society, workforce, governance, and leadership. And then within that, they're broken out. I won't read this. I can share this out, and you'll see it coming in some of our material soon. So since we had the time, I thought I would quickly share that. Great. So are there any other final questions? All right. Well, thank you so much to Christa, Michelle, and Amanda for being here and sharing your expertise with us. As always, we appreciate you. And to everyone else, this recording will be sent out to all who are registered and stored in the member portal. So thank you for being here.